Yeah.
Hello, everyone. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. Welcome to the HR Roundtable. We're very pleased to introduce Amy Bernstein, who's going to be talking to us about cultivating a resilient culture. Her passion and purpose is to help people, teams, and organizations to unleash their potential. She is a change accelerator and executive coach, a consultant, a keynote speaker with over 35 years of experience in the areas of leadership mastery, collaborative teams and cultures, and mindfulness in action, stress, and reduction. Her corporate clients have included Chanel USA, the Ritz-Carlton Company, Microsoft, Novartis Latin America, the Port of Singapore Authority, and MasterCard. She's also worked with municipalities, universities, and nonprofit organizations such as Big Brothers Big Sisters, Nonprofits First, and NASA. Amy received her master's degree in counseling psychology from Boston University and interned at Massachusetts General under the auspices of Harvard Medical School. She's a California licensed psychotherapist and the author of Stress Less, Achieve More: Simple Ways to Turn Pressure into a Positive Force in Your Life. Her book is available in English, Arabic, and Mandarin. It was voted one of the 17 inspiring books to be read by Thrive Global. Amy's also been listed in Who's Who in American Women. Let me turn it over to you now, Amy.
Thank you. And you can take the, if you would admit people as they come in, I'd appreciate that. Thank you. So hi, thank you for joining me today on this webinar on cultivating a resilient culture. As you know, we are living in disruptive times. And, we can point to the pandemic, we can point to the racial and gender call for equity. We can talk about fake news. We can talk about political divisiveness. We can talk about weather changes and climate change. We can talk about advances in science and technology. But in my mind, there's something bigger going on. What I see is that there is an evolutionary shift that is occurring, that is affecting us individually and collectively. And this evolutionary impulse, which I call the roar of the more, is unraveling the old in order for the new to be born. As this energy, as this vibration is vibrating more faster than what we're used to. What we're seeing is mental illness. We're seeing violence in different ways. It's changing our world. It's changing our organizations. And many of us are experiencing our own transformations. Organizations' leaders are scrambling to define this new normal and to develop it. And while employees are feeling emotionally disconnected and isolated. Culture has always mattered. But during this evolutionary shift, it matters more than ever. So in my presentation, I'm going to discuss 6 strategies to cultivate a resilient culture, which can provide psychological safety for your associates and move your organization forward. To begin, though, I'd like to tell you a story. In the 1990s, I was a consultant to the area president of First Union Bank in Broward County, Florida. And at that time, First Union had acquired Hollywood Federal. Understandably, the staff of Hollywood Federal were concerned about being acquired. They didn't know whether they would continue to have their jobs, whether they would be downsized. And even if they remained employees, they had no idea what kind of company First Union was. Would they be respected, engaged, welcomed? Would they have opportunities for professional development and to express their creativity? Would they be empowered, or was First Union an autocratic company? As the executive team of First Union understood these concerns, they decided to hold a special event, a nighttime event for Hollywood Federal employees. They rented a movie theater and asked the Hollywood employees to dress in evening wear. When they arrived at the theater, Each attendee was given a hand light like you see in rock concerts that you wave around. And when the light in the theater went out, the curtain opened, and to the tune of Hooray, Hooray for Hollywood, the area president, the area president and his executive team came in top hat and canes, came dancing on stage. I should tell you that none of them were professional dancers, if you know what I mean. Yet they were willing to be vulnerable and have fun. This surprised the audience and opened them to the possibility that the acquisition may not be a bad thing. After the executives danced, the area president told them about First Union's culture and that no one would lose their job. In looking back at how the executive team handled the acquisition, I'm still impressed. That audience was blown away. The energy in that theater was so high. They understood that the organization's culture can often turn a difficult situation around. They also recognized that it's the reinforced communication, and even more important, the actions of its leaders, which establishes the culture. As HR people, you understand the importance of an organization's culture. And in these high pressure times, which the US Army War College calls VUCA, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous, organizational culture is more important than ever. Although some people want to go back to what was a new normal, which no one at this point can define, is emerging. For people to rise to the occasion and stay engaged, productive, and innovative in this new world of work, they need to be supported by a resilient organizational culture. Although we usually think of resilience as the ability to bounce back from adversity, these days it's not good enough. Instead, organizations need to bounce forward. So what defines a company's culture as resilience? A resilient culture tends to have strong, transparent, and visible leadership, engaged and empowered employees, a strong brand trust, both internally and externally. They have an ethical core, so employees don't have to second guess the right thing to do. And they also have an agile working model, fostering a climate of collaboration that enables rapid communication and supportive, effective colleague networks. In this webinar, I'm going to introduce you to a few ways you can build your cultural resilience. The process for me begins with establishing self-care as an organizational competence. Now, with everything that you have on your plate, and I know everybody's busy beyond busy, why make self-care a priority? Research states that 70% of employees are more stressed than they've ever been in their career. 96% of senior leaders are burnt out. In addition, the Society for Human Resource Management found 71% of employers are struggling to adjust to remote work. 65% say maintaining employee morale has been a challenge, and more than a third are facing difficulties with company culture. Furthermore, Google searches for how to get our brains to focus has increased 300%. That's like a yay! The problem is that we're giving energy out, but we're not equally taking it in or restoring it. Our attention so focused externally that we're disconnected from ourselves and we are out of balance. Thus, self-care is essential as it enhances well-being by guiding your mind, body back into balance. Now, for the first time in my life, there's a collective call for self-care. In fact, September was Self-Care Month and was celebrated by Forbes and Inc. magazine. Yet for many leaders, there's a stigma of stress, the old thing of don't let them see you sweat. So therefore, they either don't practice self-care or else they don't acknowledge it. For example, a vice president of HR who was at his position for less than a year recently confided to me he was feeling stressed. I've known this man for years. He is an outstanding HR leader, competent, communicative, inclusive, open-minded, compassionate. I'm crazy about this guy. However, Between onboarding and the additional challenges the pandemic has brought to every business, it's understandable that he felt stressed. Thus, I suggested he engage in a self-care program. As others in his organizations were stressed as well, I encouraged him to model self-care by creating a video in which he discussed his journey of self-care and urged his employees to do the same. His new company values productivity above all else. Given this cultural norm and his being new to the organization, he declined my suggestion. I understood. There's a stigma to stress, and he didn't want to be labeled as incompetent or less than in any way. See, for all our talk about authentic leadership and leadership from the inside out and all the terms that we use, our model of leadership historically is based on the survival of the fittest. As survival is fear-based, it creates a need to control our environment, and it also brings about competition. Most of us were raised with the image of leaders as warriors, able to handle whatever is thrown their way calmly and decisively. Thus, from the CEO down, leaders often are reluctant to admit to being stressed as they're afraid of being seen as not powerful or capable enough. As they want to project an image that generates confidence to their stakeholders, they tend to resist the pressure, become stressed, and then shoulder on. But what if showing vulnerability by acknowledging your stress and engaging in self-care is a sign of strength and authentic leadership? Vulnerability is about sharing our feelings and our experiences with people who have earned the right to hear them. Your employees have earned that right. Many leaders I've spoken with have reached out to their staff to inquire how they're doing during these challenging times. Although they're willing to listen compassionately, many of their associates don't feel safe in fully disclosing their stress levels and how it's affecting their productivity and engagement. Thus, I encourage leaders to model self-care, and in doing so, create psychological safety for their associates. When people feel safe to discuss their stress and empowered to engage in self-care, engagement, productivity, and collaboration increase. When creating your self-care program, and I really urge HR people who are so much more savvy in terms of emotional issues, when you create your own self-care program, includes physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual aspects, as well as work changes that make a difference. Then share your story more than once with your employees and create follow-up strategies for supporting self-care. For example, at Microsoft Latin America, I recently provided a webinar on self-care, and then we created a support group, self-care support group, to keep the momentum going. Over time, self-care and the resilience it supports will become part of your organizational culture as employees come to believe that their well-being truly matters to you and your organization. Second, acknowledge the shadow. When stress builds, people may operate from their smaller selves, often enabling the shadow to appear. The shadow is that part of us which we want to avoid or ignore. It is the unacceptable and often negative emotions and impulses of the personality, like power striving, greed, envy, selfishness, and anger. For example, when a trusted administrator mistakenly deleted a file, her usually kind boss yelled, "Why did you do this to me?" The shadow is dark because it's obscured from our awareness. The shadow of a team member, particularly the boss, can negatively affect the team by inadvertently creating interpersonal rivalries, closed-mindedness, lack of follow-through, and defensiveness. Collectively, these behaviors often result in patterns of workplace behaviors, politics, procedures, structure, and cultures that limit the organization and its workforce from thriving. As long as the individual and the team is living in its shadow, creativity and breakthroughs are limited. recognizing that we all have times when the shadow takes over. To create a resilient culture, you need to proactively prepare for those days when the boss becomes a bully or the caring creative colleague transforms into a drama queen. Here are some suggestions. Once you've acknowledged your shadow self, use it to evolve. As Otto Scharmer states, seeing our shadow is a source of transformation that allows us to step into a new space of possibilities. He proposes 3 questions. What am I not seeing? In other words, where is my view distorted by a frozen mind? What am I not feeling? Where is my sensing distorted by a frozen heart? What actions, grounded in this deep seeing and sensing, am I not co-initiating yet? Where are my actions distorted by a frozen will? Our egos may not want to admit to our shadow, but our colleagues are usually quite aware of it. As humans, we're all in process. No one's perfect. You are not going to fix or kill the shadow. That only makes it more powerful. Instead, infusing it with loving awareness enables you to integrate the shadow into your being and become more whole. So here's the process that teams that I've known and worked with, and my colleagues have worked with, have used in order to deal with the shadow. Once you've acknowledged the shadow, provide a process in which team members identify their shadow, within a group, so everyone's calling it off, and the subsequent behaviors they demonstrate when their shadow appears. Also have them identify their anger and stress triggers. Then create team agreements or protocols when the shadow appears. For example, do team members want to be immediately confronted, or do they want to take time away from each other for a day? In one local nonprofit I worked with, the executive director instructed her team to play Latin music anytime her shadow appeared. This was a great way of making her aware. Plus, it relaxed her. As for her team, this was their invitation to take a break and dance. Knowing up front how colleagues want to be treated saves a lot of time, energy, and aggravation. It prevents interactions that can spark and transmit the shadow from rippling through the organization. Now, I know you know all this because you've all probably had that experience where you go to your boss or you go to the CEO or somebody, and the administrator says to you, watch out, he's having a bad day, right? His shadow is appearing, right? So the process that I'm suggesting also develops the emotional connectivity essential to an organization's peak performance. And when you're going through this, also examine the collective shadow of the organization. The process helps maintain the integrity and performance of the individual, team, and company as a whole. The next step that I suggest in building cultural resilience is to help people understand how their work contributes to the greater good. When I was writing my book, Stress Less, Achieve More, I interviewed Tim Arnst, who was the Senior Vice President International for Universal Parks and Resorts. Instead of just communicating the HR strategy and how it fits with the organization's business strategy to his VPs, who would then spread the word to their staff and so on down the line, the old telephone conversation, he gathered his whole division together for a strategy session. Tim talked about where they were going and what he saw each department doing to get there. He shared 3 critical things he thought they needed to get done in each area and how it aligned to the overall business strategy. They then went through every area of HR. He said, and I quote, "Let me show you how all the pieces are going to fit together. We will be successful, and here's how." Tim told me, quote, "I could see them thinking, I see how I fit. I see how I am part of the bigger thing. And the bigger thing was not HR, it's the business. I could see the relief on their face. Many people thanked me and told me how helpful it was to understand the whole plan and how their work contributed to the greater good." Now, this strategy helps build cultural resilience as it brings meaning and purpose to associates' work. And what I'm seeing is times are changing. Instead of just thinking of your associates as employees who you tell them what to do and they do it, and then you rate them on how well they're doing and this whole management stuff, people today want to feel like contributors. That's what energizes them. That's what gives them meaning. So as soon as you share with them how their work contributes to the greater good, it creates a collective energy that fuels the organization's ability to successfully deal with challenges and adversity. Next suggestion is develop shared ownership for success. No matter how smart or talented, most successful leaders realize that if they're building a bridge to the future, they can't do it alone. Paying for people's involvement helps, but money and perks alone don't necessarily buy people's passion, commitment, honest feedback, accountability, and innovative suggestions for innovation. What's needed is a shared ownership mentality for change and success. As the future cannot be mandated, negotiated, or controlled, establishing a workplace community built on shared ownership in service of the greater good builds a collective resilient muscle. Shared ownership infers that as citizens of the community, we are co-creators of the future. United, we are capable of handling whatever comes our way. Shared ownership increases employee engagement, enhances collaboration, and generates a positive workplace culture. Even though there are leaders in charge, shared ownership helps people, promote diversity of thinking and the willingness to dissent in an authentic rather than a dysfunctional manner. It creates a united workplace community as it is based on associates choosing communal accountability and commitment. Shared ownership is based on the understanding that to generate organizational success, stakeholders must be willing to risk self-change. Many organizations attempt to build shared ownership through surveys. Although this process is expedient, it's a limited method. Often surveys are considered by associates as just another piece of paper to fill out. Thus, they do it quickly. Those who provide more detailed information often have a concern they want to disclose. Now, it's important that they do so. However, surveys do not provide an adequate understanding of the backstory or how much ownership the person complaining has in the situation. Thus, the results of the survey don't always tell the full story. My preference is to bring associates together for an event, which I call Partners in Change. In this event, we define ownership, commitment, accountability, and functional dissent. And you can do this virtually as well. We then build trust by creating shared agreements regarding its three foundational components: control, inclusion, and openness. Following this, we break into groups to discuss questions that matter, such as what's the possible future we want to create together? And what's your ownership in that which you complain about the most? This process generates an organizational momentum and enthusiasm for change that endures long after the event itself. If anyone's interested in learning more about my process, just contact me. However, even if you don't engage in a large group process, there are still many, many ways to institutionalize shared ownership into your culture. And by the way, even if you don't have the authority to create it for the whole organization, you can create shared ownership for your particular team. In one organization I worked with, the senior vice president of a division developed shared ownership. We went through a process. We helped him develop his dream team and his dream division and all that. but he didn't want his president to know because he knew that they would shut him down. So what we did is we worked quietly. We didn't announce it. We just did this. After a number of years, the president of the company came to this division, which was a different location. And the president is walking around through the halls of the division. And he says to the senior VP, he says, something's different about this place. People are smiling, they're laughing, they seem to be having a good time. He says, that's not what happens in New York, which is where the corporate office was. So then the senior VP told him about what we did. And the senior VP, the president, excuse me, ended up bringing all his executives to this plant, this different location. And we had a town hall meeting where any of the executives can ask the people in the division, and that included, from the senior VP all the way down to the, the administrators, anything they wanted to ask. Nothing was scripted. And by the end of that meeting, the president of this company decided to create his own shared ownership of change because he realized what that was like and how it can positively affect the organization. So I recognize that you probably have ways that you've created shared ownership of change. And I'd like to stop now and to create a breakout session, so that you can begin to share what you have done to create shared ownership of change. So we're going to do this for 10 minutes, and please choose a facilitator or recorder who will report back your group's findings. So Patricia, take it away.
Everybody should have received an invite to a breakout room. We'll see you in just a few minutes.
Do you want to facilitate this, or should I, or?
No, you go right ahead.
Okay, so does anybody, we don't have time for every group to come forward, I don't think, but does any group want to come and share what they shared in the group? So much for shared ownership.
Okay, I'll jump in.
This is the issue you're gonna be dealing with, right? How do you solve it?
I don't think we solved anything in our group, but we did acknowledge that a good part of the problem, even as you try to deal with resilience, is that people are feeling very burnt out, and you can talk with them about how we're all working in this together, what your part is. I mean, I think that communication is so key, and I want to do more of it. But the demands on them, the added extra time people have been putting in, because I think everybody's seeing, extended hours, that we're just dealing with people who are burnt out. And even when you talk about wellness and taking that self-care and things like that, people are saying, I can't take time off. I can't do this. So it's trying to find that balance that's really, really hard right now.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I'm seeing that all over too. One of the things that I'm talking for myself now, but one of the things that I see is that the pandemic will come and go. Remote work, ways that we work together, we'll figure it out, But as for myself, I'm seeing that the opportunity in this disruptive time is for me to find an inner balance, for me to find the self-love, for me to acknowledge myself, for me to stand up for myself and say, hey, supervisor or whatever, give me priorities, or I can't do it all, or, for us to have conversations that matter around this stuff. So I hear that, that people are burnt. I know I'm going to offer some of my suggestions, and one of them obviously is no meeting Fridays, so people can have some time for themselves. But I think that this is a big conversation that we have to have. And if we just ignore it, if we just ignore it because everyone's burnt out, um, uh, it's like we're throwing the baby out with the bathwater for me. That's my point of view. You'll decide how you feel.
I mean, to build off of that a little bit, I feel like I'm definitely still growing professionally, but as I entered a new organization, sort of feeling that I'm being evaluated based on like, what are you bringing to the table? And like, we didn't have HR originally, but being just like kind of like radically candid with my supervisor recently. Like I had a conversation with PJ just about like, to your point, prioritization. Okay, you want to do all these initiatives, then like, what do you want me to like put a little bit on the back table and so we can accomplish some of these, because they all can't be priority number one. So yeah, just open and honest communication is definitely something that I personally have been working on, and just being okay with like, that's what I needed to say.
Yeah, good for you. Good for you. It takes courage. It really takes courage. So I salute you, Tony. Thank you. Yeah. Anybody else want to share before I start rambling off with some of my ways to create shared ownership?
I would only add, this is Deborah, that in our group, collaboration was an important aspect to building trust. That within our group, we had experienced it ourselves, that it's important not only to work together within your HR department or within your organization, but to express that. We're doing in our organization a meet and greet with the department to get some time one-on-one to start to set a foundation of collaboration with the different departments and the different staff, and acknowledgement of some of the simpler things of life, people's birthdays, people's anniversaries. And I think we all have done this, we all do this, but occasionally I've just, in my organization, I've just found that it's really it's been a good thing. We kind of lost sight of it and we've resurrected it a little bit. And so that would be it.
Thanks, Deborah. Okay, just because time is limited, I'm going to move on. Here are some ways that, let's see, share my screen. Where are we? Oh, wait, I'm sorry. Okay. Here's some ways that I know to build shared ownership. First, you need to have a process to create a shared vision for what a resilient culture looks like. We throw the word around, but let's sit and talk about it. And what does it not only look like, what does it feel like, right? So much of the time we're in our heads, we talk about, what does it feel like? That's the stuff that creates the juice, the connection, all of that. Develop a shared definition and understanding for ownership, commitment, accountability, and functional dissent. Practice sharing control, don't micromanage. Whenever possible, let your employees decide how to achieve the task you've assigned. Agree upon what constitutes a successful outcome and fill them in on any pertinent history. Then let them chart their own way. This builds ownership in the process, and they might even figure out a method for doing the job that's better than what you had. If this happens, call attention to it. If they choose a poor methodology, instead of focusing on the negative, which can shame or diminish them, ask questions that enable them to see better options and give them another chance. Next, another way to share control is to delegate authority, not just work. Share leadership responsibility then by giving them a role in some of the meetings they attend. Leadership skills develop over time and they require practice. On a similar note, share the limelight with them. For example, let them be the one interviewed by the local paper and acknowledged for their great work with reward that matches the result. Oftentimes, the best reward is recognition. additional trust, and an added level of responsibility. Be open, the second element that builds trust. Share the why of your decisions and why you're assigning a task or responsibility to them. Give them constructive feedback on a regular basis and coach them to step up to the next level of their ability. Be inclusive, which is the third element that builds trust. Now, it's easy to be inclusive when you agree with others, but not so easy when you don't. For example, years ago, I coached a senior vice president of a world-class beauty company and his brilliant all-woman top team. One of the women, who I'll call Lily, would go to his office and complain that she was not included by the other members. She would get so upset she would cry, and he, being a benevolent patriarch, would hand her tissues. In confidence, though, he told me that some team members wanted her fired, and he was thinking of doing so. When I investigated, I found out that, for example, if a team member wrote a joint email inviting all the members to her office at 1 o'clock for pizza, Lily wouldn't attend because she wasn't personally invited. When the issue of inclusion came up at our first team retreat, one of the women told Lily to snap out of it. Now, that didn't surprise me. Conventional wisdom is, if you don't play by group norms, you're not welcomed. I recommended another approach. Instead of going against her, I suggested we step into Lily's shoes and see the world through her perspective and identify the seed of truth in it. Once we fully do this, we can effortlessly lead her in the team's direction. Thus, I suggested we give Lily what she wanted by going out of the way to include her. The team begrudgingly agreed. After a couple of months, things changed dramatically. Lily no longer felt like an outsider and thus didn't need the extra courtesy. Within a few months, she was well installed in the team and rose to become one of the star members. Also, in terms of inclusion, encourage associates with innovative ideas and support their autonomy to develop and implement them. Develop new work norms. As I mentioned in the beginning of the presentation, we're in the midst of shifting from what was to a new way of working. Remote work brings its challenges, as you've mentioned. So to build the resilient culture, one thing you can do is shift the structure to promote greater freedom. Empower employees to decide when, where, and how they want to work and stay productive, regardless of whether that's on a desktop, laptop, mobile. Sometimes, for example, taking a walk outside while participating in a team meeting can help promote the creative thinking essential to solving team issues. Next, institutionalize no internal meetings on Friday. Accenture, for example, encourages their people to take PTO on Fridays so they can recharge. By having no internal meetings, people feel they can really take off and not miss something important. Third, avoid meetings around lunchtime so team members can get lunch for themselves, their kids, take a nap, take a walk, disconnect during the day. Next, limit video calls. Use video calls for brainstorming, team building, and training only. Document information you want to share so people can read it on their own time. Don't waste their time on a Zoom call by giving them a bunch of information. Develop new ways to generate emotional connectivity. Emotional connectivity is the secret sauce that energizes employees and fuels a resilient culture. It occurs when employees deeply connect with each other, feel supported by their leaders, and are comfortable and accepted being themselves at work. In turn, they love working for their organization and want to add value. It's the ground emotional connectivity for the alignment of values, collaboration that brings out the best in people, support system structures, and a culture that helps people succeed. Here's some suggestions. Verizon senior talent and diversity leaders, and you've talked a little bit about this, hold daily connection, business-free touch bases with her direct report. They've met one another's families, pets, shared tips on how to survive and even thrive, learned how to make a Mexican meal during Cinco de Mayo, and celebrated birthdays virtually. Next, write thank you notes instead of emails when people go the extra mile. Next, conduct once a month breakfast of champion meetings in which the CEO has breakfast virtually with those elected by their team because of their outstanding contribution or their performance. Fourth, encourage collaboration, as you've said. And fifth, treat people with respect. In a study done by Best Practice Institute, they asked 100 executives, what is the one factor you need from an employer to motivate your performance and help you be great at your job? As it turned out, it wasn't money, it was respect. Last, be open to unlearning things. As we move from the old way of working to the new normal, it's important not to assume that how you did things in the past is the best way forward. Although leaders are often revered for their knowledge, facing yourself and saying, I don't know, is essential wisdom needed in this VUCA world. As Orville Wright, the inventor of the airplane, said, if we worked on the assumption that what is accepted as true really is true, then there would be little hope for advance. Remember that every day is an opportunity to discover new ways of doing something. Remain curious, adaptable, and remember that with shared ownership, your staff can help you navigate innovative, agile ways to succeed. I would also say to you, when I do my self-care webinar, I talk about things people can do to help them develop self-care in terms of their work. So part of that was prioritizing and asking questions like, is this project, is this task aligned with my values? If not, don't do it. Have the conversation with your boss. Ask yourself, can someone else do this project better than me? If so, delegate it. You need to have some structure in terms of what you take on, just as you've mentioned. Last but not least, in terms of cultivating a resilient culture, you need to energize people. Sorry about that. People are energized when their strengths are understood, appreciated, leveraged, and improved. So when writing Stress Less, Achieve More, I interviewed Vishen Lakhiana, who is the founder and CEO of Mind Valley. And Mind Valley is a small personal development company in Malaysia who's doing incredible things. So here's some ways that they do it. Mind Valley has a company gratitude website. Employees, family members, customers, and partners are invited to post entries about whatever they're grateful for that has occurred over the last 24 hours. The thinking behind this is by acknowledging what you're grateful for, you maximize your happiness and grow those parts of your life. It also provides vision and opportunity to learn what's making this company happy. Secondly, they have awesome reports. Instead of the usual meeting in which people focus on what went wrong, their weekly meetings focus on what went right and honor the week's outstanding employees. A day before the meeting, employees send Vision a weekly update that includes sale records that were broken, innovation, new product launches, as well as amazing things that they did. These are compiled into a motivating and uplifting PowerPoint that celebrates their success. Mind Valley understands that positive feelings are contagious and thus does their best to spread them. They groom people. He exposes his staff to brilliant minds. He hosts parties in which speakers mingle with employees. He sends employees to conferences around the world. He recognizes that exposing people to thought leaders they develop professionally, their confidence rises, their presence expands. And although you might not have the money to do that or the connections that he has, you can create a similar scaled down program. For example, years ago, I had something called the Mastery Institute for the Public Benefit, which is now debunked. But I had leaders, thought leaders, present virtually to the executive directors who were participants. And some thought leaders I knew, but a lot of them I didn't. And amazingly, they all presented for free. There's a lot of other ways, but I know our time is getting short, so whether it's guided meditations that you do every week with people, or using symbolism and events to mark the boundaries from the old to the new. I mean, there's lots of things that you can do, and I'm sorry that I'm cutting this short. I want to honor our time together, but please feel free to contact me, and I will, and I put my email address in the chat for you. In closing, I realized that with everything that's on your plate during the pandemic, culture resilience is probably not on the top of your list. Yet investing in culture Resilience significantly will help you avoid problems and develop a positive future. Although I've offered numerous suggestions, start small, go for the low-hanging plum. Choose one approach and then continuously promote it. Let your stakeholders know that you're on a collective journey towards generating an extraordinary culture of well-being that supports the individual as well as the organizations and its clients. And I recognize as what you said that they're so busy with stuff, they don't want to hear about well-being. But if you repeatedly request that you need their suggestions, energy, and time to make it so, that you keep saying to them, whether they want to hear it or not, we care about your well-being. Eventually, they're going to get it. They're going to go inch by inch, and something will change. Remind that as humans, we move in the direction of our image of the future. And that as C.S. Lewis said, there are far, far better things ahead than what we leave behind. So thank you for your time and participations. If you have any questions about anything I presented, please feel free to contact me. And if you want to, if you have an issue you want to discuss with your organization, just contact me, no charge. And before I close, I do want to tell you about my Roar of the More training and coaching program, which I'm excited about. I said that these are evolutionary times. And I really believe that this is an opportunity for all of us to transform and to grow. I recognize that all of us have powerful potential and that all of us have limited mindsets that we've learned in childhood that are limiting us from really moving forward. So my intent for the program is to use the evolutionary impulse, the Roar of the More, to shift into the next best version of who we are. Rather than just self-awareness and information, I'm going to show you how to embody the upgraded version of yourself. And I learned this work through 40 years of energy work from the martial art of Aikido. It is the most powerful approach I've ever learned and has significantly changed my life and the leaders I've coached for the better. Now, as part of my legacy, I want to share it with the public. So I've created a flyer with a video link, 5-minute video, which Patricia is going to send out to you today. And if you're interested in the program, I'm hosting a 20-minute Zoom call tomorrow morning at 9:30. And I've put in the chat the Zoom link, and it's in the flyer that Patricia will send out. And I'm going to answer people's questions and talk to you about transformation and how I see it. So again, thanks for your time, and I hope you'll join me tomorrow. And please feel free to call on me if I can be of service to your organization. In closing, may the world return to you the peace you give to others.
Thank you so much, Amy. Everybody have a great weekend. Thank you.
Thank you.